Welcome. This presentation is number 2 of 9 presentations introducing the marvelous work and a wonder to the world. I mentioned during the introduction to the marvelous work and a wonder that the book Human Reality, Who Are We and Why We Exist, along with its future addendum, will become the most widely read component of this work. This book transcends all of the customary and traditional belief systems that, again, have done nothing to solve our human problems or answer our human questions. This book is intended for all the people of the world, especially those who are looking for the answers to their questions about their own personal existence. I mentioned a future addendum to this book. This first edition that has been published is intended for the people of the earth as far as they have progressed intellectually, because the world can only handle what its people can understand based on their current reality. The intent of the first edition of the Human Reality book is to allow the world to catch up in its experience so that the people will be better prepared to understand the real truths about our existence as eternal human beings. As mentioned, most people, in protection of their personal value and ego, reject change. Nobody wants to believe that everything that one believes about his or her human existence is not actually real truth. As the marvelous work and a wonder challenges current belief systems, more help will be needed from advancing technology and intelligence in order to establish empirical evidence of its truths. Patiently, I like to call it the patience of the saints, we have to wait for a good portion of the present belief systems to leave our world and take with them their antiquated prejudices, their narrow views, and basically everything that they have done to the world to put it in the state that it is. Many of the older generations don't have much good to say about the upcoming generations. But if the world retained the same morals, the same virtues, and the same morality as its quote-unquote old dogs, or its old bottle of wines, who are the ones who rule and reign and greatly influence our world, our progression towards real truth would be greatly stifled. But we should learn to have patience with our fellow humans who know very little about their true existence as equally eternal human beings. And furthermore, the fear of change is that their personal values will be challenged. They have an excuse for what they believe. As mentioned, the real truth threatens their current personal values. It compromises their ego and compromises everything that they have ever believed about themselves, or at least what they were taught by others about themselves through their accepted belief systems. See, the real truth exists like a sharp two-edged sword that has the power to slice through our egos and open up a path for greater knowledge and understanding. How this is done was presented in the introduction to the marvelous work and a wonder in presentation number 1. Can you imagine, for example, telling a person who has dedicated years of their experience upon this earth to a certain career, then fostering and expanding that career in order to take advantage of all the opportunities that life has to offer? Can you imagine telling them that all of the experience was for nothing? Personally, I know a man who dedicated many years of his life in becoming a doctor. He was a podiatrist, a foot doctor. I know that he saved vigorously for his retirement as he worked hard all throughout his life to establish things upon this earth for himself and his family. He sold this practice and was getting ready to live the good life when he was working upon his roof and fell off and died. It's a true story, and similar scenarios happen many, many times every day upon this earth as humans proceed to live out their reality, believing that what they're doing is of great worth, only to have it end at any moment. From this man's personal perspective, was life worth living? What a travesty to experience life in this way. It appears that all there is to look forward to is death. At least so it would seem to those who only see this world from their current perspective. The real truth is, there is no such thing as death as we consider it from the standpoint of our reality as advanced, eternal human beings. And it's from this perspective, that of a newly created advanced human being, that the Human Reality book was written. Let's review for a moment what was introduced as the 3 stages of our human experience. First, we have always existed, we exist today, and we will always exist as an eternal human being. This is our real, true self. And everything that we experience, whether it be a memory of our past or what we are experiencing currently, it is always done in our present conscious mind, so that we don't get bored with our existence, and to augment our joy of being an eternal human being, we have the ability to enter an experience which can be best understood as a virtual world that is generated by a highly advanced computer program that allows our minds to interact with the program in a suspended physical state, but continually exist as an eternal human being. While our eternal brains interact with the program, it does not allow us to have any memory of who we are. This permits us to develop into a completely different free will character, a new person, outside of our true selves. This then becomes our second estate, or the experience of being a newly created advanced human being. And our third estate is the one that we are experiencing now upon this earth as mortals. The Human Reality book deals with our experiences only in the second and third estates. The reason for this is because the newly created human who we have become, outside of our true selves, is the only experience that concerns us as eternal human beings at this moment, while we are interacting with the program that allows us to have the new experience. Furthermore, in order for each of us to personally benefit from the experience of interacting with the program, we need to immerse ourselves, all of our concentration and mental efforts, into the program and its overall purpose. And the program's only intent is to provide us with the experience of being newly created advanced human beings, and then thereafter to experience mortality. Within the parameters of the program, the mortal state enhances the newly created advanced human state. And that's all the knowledge, that's the hokey pokey that the world is to have, that is now revealed through the Human Reality book. I know there are still many who are confused, and it is our intention that by the end of this presentation, the world will have no reason or excuse why it shouldn't understand our real human existence. Let's briefly discuss our first estate as eternal humans. And I call the experiences states because although all of our experiences take place in our advanced eternal human brain, which is only one place to our conscious mind, during each estate of experience, each one takes place in a different location and environment. For want of a better term, we can call these environments worlds. We have existed, do exist, and will always exist in our first estate. It is an eternal world. The location of our existence is an actual place with an environment that is perfectly suitable and sustainable, yet unchangeable, for the best human existence possible. Instead of being an actual planet, it is a plane of existence that extends infinitely in all directions. Just as we cannot perceive that the world is round from our local perspective upon this earth during our current reality, as it appears to us to be flat, an eternal human does not perceive its environment as being round, but a never-ending environment existing on a plane. If an eternal human were to walk forever, the being would never reach an end of running into other humans who have always existed and who have continual, multidirectional experiences infinitely forever. It is here in our first estate where our brains are wirelessly connected to an advanced program of incredible energy that allows us to interact with and record the second and third estates of our experience. And as we go through each estate, the program works with our eternal brain and manages the amount of energy that is transferred and how the energy is transferred in order to create the experience. All memories and knowledge that we have as an eternal human being are stored in one part of our eternal, limitless brain. During our second estate, the program blocks this energy, or rather manages it, allowing us to develop into a newly created advanced human being, a completely different person from who we actually are. Then, when we go through our third state in what we perceive as mortality, the program manages the transference of energy even further, thus enabling the eternal, limitless mind to think that it is mortal and store experiences as if it is. When the experiences are complete, and we discontinue the use of the advanced program that we are, for want of a better way to explain it, plugged into, all of the experience will then become part of our conscious and ever-present reality as an eternal human being. And because of the powers of our true eternal brains, the very moment that we recall any experience in our past, we will relive the experience as if it were happening again in our present state. Thus our existence, as has been explained, as an eternal human, no matter what experience we are recalling of our past, instantly becomes the current experience of the present. As eternal humans, when we want to recall a past experience, our brains are able to find the memory, make it a conscious thought, and then we relive the experience as we recorded it, utilizing all of our senses in reliving the memory exactly like we experienced the event in the environment in which we first had it. Our real eternal brain is awesome. I mentioned that after another 10 years or so, we will publish the Human Reality Addendum, or the second and final edition. This will reveal the real truth about our first estate and be the final explanation of all human reality and experience. But since this is not a presentation of this further component of the marvelous work and a wonder, we'll concentrate our discussions to the second and third estate of our experience as revealed in the Human Reality book. So that there is no excuse, let me once again explain as clearly as I can the entire real truth about our existence. We exist as unchangeable humans who are physically similar in that we all have individual perfect bodies, although unique to the individual, that react to and act within an environment that allows for the best human experience possible. To add to our experience as an unchangeable human being, therefore adding to our experience of joy and happiness, we allow our minds to enter a highly advanced program that has the ability to create the new experience. This program operates, although much more advanced, similar to the wireless technology that we are used to today. It has the ability to allow different users to access, download, and participate with each other within the parameters of the advanced technology. We share in each other's experience by allowing our mind to access the same program that others are accessing to have their new experience. This occurs within our minds while existing in an eternal world, which is better described as a never-ending plane of existence. Yes, we have eternal relationships with these equal but individual human beings, and as we interact with others, we form bonds and relationships of experience throughout each of the different estates of experience. Once these bonds are created, they connect us to the other person's experience, or to them, forever. The program first allows us to create a whole new world where we will become a completely different person as a newly created advanced human being. Then we experience various mortal incarnates that provide many different types of experiences. When we have advanced within the program to a point where we have nothing further to gain from the experience of becoming a newly created human being, a whole other person outside of ourselves, we can then leave the program, and our memories of the experience join an infinite amount of eternal experiences that will always be with us and which we will always enjoy. And that, folks, is the hokey pokey. Now, I know still that it is such a new concept, but it's a concept that will answer all human questions. But even so, I'm going to reiterate it throughout this broadcast, throughout this presentation, and I will be available again every week on the radio to be able to clarify these things and answer people's questions. But again, pertaining to the Human Reality book, our only concern is our present reality. So let's talk about our second estate, or the experience of becoming an entirely different person than who we really are. From our present experience, we realize that DNA patterns that we receive from our parents can shape personality types, and that we can inherit other genetically influenced traits. And with the advent of cloning, the relationship dynamic of being a parent and passing on physical traits will not be limited to only a male and female, but will include same-sex relationships and single parents who only use their own DNA to create a whole new person. Our parents influence our physical brain during mortality, because the brain in which a person's experience takes place and is stored was constructed from a blueprint of sorts that was provided by our equally mortal parents. These inherited genetic traits do not allow us to take full responsibility of making a personal free-willed choice of who we became as mortals, at least so it seems. Therefore, it appears that we are not solely responsible for what our genes provide us. Also, our third estate's environments do not provide equal opportunity for everyone to have the same opportunities to develop. Those people, the majority of the world's population, who are born with limited opportunities, do not develop the same on an emotional level, whether that level be good for us or bad for us, as those who are born into a world of no need or want. Therefore, our mortal environments also influence who we become during our mortal life. In our third estate, our capabilities, or rather our free will, is limited and controlled by these two factors. Again, who our parents are, and what mental and physical traits we inherit from them, and in what environment we experience life. This fact seems to take away free will and make us puppets of circumstance. However, according to how things really are in the universe, when it pertains to human beings, none of us are puppets, and we each control all aspects of our experience. Yes, every bit of our experience is controlled by each individual. Free will is the eternal component of our true nature. We experience what we want to experience. Yes, but this contradicts everything you just said, Christopher, about our mortal existence being a product of genetically inherited factors and our environment. How can we be personally responsible for who we are if we are subject to the abilities and limitations that our parents gave us and the environment in which we live? This is why our second estate is set up differently than how it is here in mortality. In our second estate, there are no inherited genetics that take place, and we exist in a perfect environment, an environment of no need that provides all opportunities equally to all individuals to develop how they desire according to their free will. The program that establishes the environment in our second estate creates a similar environment to the perfect environment in which we exist as eternal humans. This is necessary because the body in which the newly created human will develop and become a completely new person cannot be influenced or manipulated by the environment, or the newly created person will become a product of the environment instead of the product of free will and personal choice. The body provided for the new person must also be of such a nature that it is not influenced or manipulated within the environment in which it is created. Thus, the body and the environment in which it exists allow only the person to determine what the newly created being becomes. It allows free will. And it is only through exercising free will that our true self, as eternal human beings, unaware that we're going through a new experience, can control the person who we become. If there were not free will, then we would have no control over the person inside the parameters of the program we are participating in to create the new experience. Here's how we became a newly created advanced human being. First, let's talk about the person who creates the body in the second estate for the newly created person. After going through the process of becoming a new person as a newly created advanced human, and then experienced various mortalities where the individual lived as a male and a female, some choose to remain in the second estate of experience as an advanced human mother in order to raise newly created humans. This person is always female and can continue the experience of being an advanced mother as long as she wants. She is always female because of the way she is required to raise, or better foundationalize, the newly created person. She is responsible for the establishment of the new person's ability to use the physical senses to react to the new environment. And, for example, she will need breasts that provide the way that a newly created person's taste buds are established or foundationalized. The advanced mother's breast milk contains various components that interact with the newly created infant's taste receptors that ensure the proper foundationalization of taste. So if a human has breasts, I suppose during our current reality here, we call her a female. Thus, all advanced mothers are female. She also has all the other benefits that a female has over a male. Males have nothing to do with the foundationalization of a new human being. And this, of course, is brought out more within the context of the Human Reality book. The mother uses her own free will to choose what the physical body of the new person will look like in the second estate. Now, I need to explain something here that I forgot to explain. And that is, I talked about how a newly created person, that an advanced human being, I'll go on to explain a little bit more, but I need to explain that there are advanced human mothers that deal within the second estate that are actually eternal human beings that chose that role for a certain purpose. In other words, as an eternal human being, you can enter the second estate of experience already as an eternal mother, or as a male, or as a governor. And these subjects I'm not going to dwell on at this time. But in other words, we have the ability, for example, to enter the game, the experience of being a newly created human being, one that does not have free will, as a character that performs a specific role within that world. And all these questions and things will come up in the future, but the addendum in the future will deal with those things, so I'm not going to concentrate on that at this time. The fact is, that if a person goes through mortality and decides after even as a newly created person, you know at that point whether you want to be a woman or not, a female advanced mother. And then you enter mortality, go through experiences, and then you stay in that realm, in that estate, and continue that role until pretty much you get tired of it. Okay? So anyway, the mother uses her own free will to choose what the physical body of the new person will look like in the second estate. The body is created without gender, so that the person can choose with its free will its own gender, if the person even wants a gender, because along with a gender, there are certain responsibilities that most people would not choose for themselves. And again, those are outlined in the Human Reality book and defined as the humanity types that we choose. The newly created human has a perfect human body similar to the ones we have as eternal advanced humans. I say similar because the bodies provided during the second estate are not exactly like our eternal bodies. We did not go through any process of development and growth in our first estate. We are unchangeable human beings who are exactly how we've been in the past and how we'll always be. But to develop into a completely different person with a completely different set of characteristics, propensities, and desires, the energy levels that exist in our brain in our first estate, where the actual experience is taking place, are completely but temporarily cut off from the area of our brain where the new experience will be recorded as an advanced, newly created human being. That way, there's no influence whatsoever coming from any part of our brain except where the new experience is forming. Now, I'm going to explain this and illustrate this in the video to clarify it even further. In our true state, as an unchangeable being, we know everything about our environment and how to act or react to this environment. In simple terms, we knew how to manipulate the environment according to our individual desires. To use some terms that will help clarify this, we knew how to run without ever having to crawl and then learning how to walk. We've always known how to manipulate our bodies to our to our environment. We've always known how to manipulate our bodies to the environment in an eternal world. But a newly created person doesn't know anything about its environment and how to manipulate it for its benefit. The way that the new person acts and reacts to the environment is something that will be developed along with the new person's other individual and unique characteristics. Therefore, the newly created human has to be an infant first and learn on its own how to live within its new environment. And since it has no stored instructions of how to act in or react to its new environment, it is provided with another human who knows all there is to know about the environment and is there to help the infant learn on its own. This is another of the responsibilities of an advanced human mother. Because the newly created human has never been a human before, according to the fact that all of its memories are blocked and it has a completely blank slate on which to create its new persona, it wouldn't have the slightest idea of what it wanted to look like. But the mother does. She chooses what the physical body is going to look like based on her own experience and her own desires. And she never creates two bodies that look the same. Again, because the newly created human doesn't know anything about gender, and it was created in order to become an individual of its own choosing, the new physical body is ungendered. It's neither a male nor a female. Created in the exact image of the eternal humans who wanted the experience. Eternal humans in their equality are, of course, equal. This means that they are ungendered. If one was male and one was female, then they wouldn't be equally endowed with the same abilities and potentials. Females would have a much greater advantage over males. Being male or female is exclusively limited to our experience in our second and third estates. Becoming one gender or another is a way in which we individually choose how we want to react to our environment. Females have different bodies, which in turn act and react differently than male bodies. It's a pretty simple concept to understand. Our advanced mothers help foundationalize our humanity and give us all the nurturing we need to become a human being. They are the most important person in our existence during the second estate of our experience. And our free will, which is promoted by our advanced mothers in our second state, is the most important part of becoming a newly created human. Now, we need to spend some time discussing the real truth about free will, or the agency and power to react to an environment without being compelled by need or fate. This is such an important concept. I'm going to try to clarify it the best I can. Free will creates the inequality that we do not experience as eternal human beings. Free will allows the possibility of a new experience that we could not have had otherwise. In our first estate, as eternal human beings, we do not have free will because we seemingly free will, and let me explain this. Because we are eternally unchangeable. Therefore, our will is going to be the same today as it was in the past, as it will continue to be presently, and as it will be in the future. The very essence of our eternal nature actually negates free will. Eternal existence cannot exist where a person makes a free, specific choice in response to something in one's environment, because the eternal person has always made the same choices forever. And furthermore, since the environment provides in perfection all that a human needs to exist forever in a perfect state, the environment only provides choices of perfection. There are no other choices available from which to choose with free will. The inequality that exists in our second estate, however, establishes a situation where our individual free will might come up against the free will of another and conflict with that person. Or it can be said that our free will creates the inequality of our second estate. Therefore, our second estate accounts for and allows this by establishing different worlds, planets, where people exist according to the comfort level that they experience in expressing their free will with others. The people cannot exist on an eternal plane like we do as eternal human beings, because there would then be no isolation from each other on a plane as there is in separate locales of environment upon planets. And to further ensure that free will is protected and allowed, a government is set up during the second estate that oversees human interaction with each other. The government is not a democracy, because the rights of the minority are just as important as the rights of the majority. The government is ran by a righteous dictator who is specifically created to fulfill this important position of power and authority. Now, this also is detailed and explained in the Human Reality book. And because free will is allowed and protected in the second estate, there are limitations placed on the abilities and potential of each newly created human according to the use of the person's free will and how the use of their free will affects the free will of others. The development of newly created humans in our second estate of experience has specific laws that are only applicable to that estate. These laws are based entirely on the purpose for the second estate, and that purpose is the exercising of free will and the eventual joy that each person receives in becoming a new individual with the ability to exercise free will. To recap what free will is, in order to help us understand the big difference between our first and second estates, both which are experienced in a perfect human environment, let me reiterate the real truth of the matter of free will. The correct definition of free will is the individual power to act and react to an environment without being compelled by need or fate. In other words, free will is negated when what we do is determined and manipulated by our past, present, or future. In other words, we are not free if we know what action we are going to take and are compelled by this knowledge to take it. And we are not free if we are compelled to act a certain way because something in our environment doesn't give us any other choice. As eternal and perfect humans existing in our first estate, we know exactly how we are going to act in the future because we acted the same way to our environment yesterday, and we would do the same today as we always have forever. So in this sense, as advanced eternal human beings, we do not have free will. but it limits the joy we can receive from existence. Simply put, if as eternal and perfect humans we didn't have the opportunity to use the advanced program of experience to create a new character for ourselves, we'd get pretty bored with our existence. In our second estate, we begin the process of establishing a foundation for our free will. In other words, we become a completely new person that can exercise free will. And in our third estate, we exercise the potential of our free will in an environment where we are free. But the free will that we exercise is completely unrestricted. Now, the Human Reality book details more of this. I'm just going over it briefly here. I know it might be confusing, and again, that's why I'm going to be available every week on the radio for people to call in and ask these questions. But now, we're back to the contradiction that I mentioned earlier about our free will being restricted in mortality in our third estate as a result of our genetics and our environment. It's a contradiction because it is a real truth that our free will is complete and unconditional all through our mortality, as it was during our development as a newly created advanced human in our second estate. We can do whatever we want here upon this earth. No one can actually force us to do what we do not want to do. Now is the time to understand another real truth in order to resolve this contradiction. While existing as newly created advanced human beings in our second estate, we choose the conditions, timing, and the parameters of the environment in which we want to experience our mortal lives. We are able to do this because during the eons of time we exist as newly created advanced human beings, we are able to observe many different mortal experiences had by other humans. And as advanced humans, we have the intelligence to gather a good sense of what our life is going to be like during certain conditions of our third estate. Therefore, it was our free will as newly created advanced human beings that placed us in certain environments with certain parents upon this earth. To understand how these choices of mortality are made, we need to consider a few more details of how we developed in a perfect world as an advanced, newly created human being, or how we dealt with our second estate. There's a lot about our second estate that is covered in the Human Reality book, of course. It was published to help us have a better idea of what our experience, our existence was like during this experience. It would take me hours to cover all the concepts revealed through its pages, but I would like to cover a couple more points during this introductory presentation. Introduction to the book, anyway. In our second estate, we are not aware of our free will because we haven't experienced anything that opposes our perfect existence. In other words, we do not experience joy because we have yet to experience any sort of pain. We developed into a completely unique individual, each with a unique and personal perspective of the self. Being raised in a perfect environment allowed us to gain incredible self-esteem and value for ourselves. We actually think, and are correct on many levels, that the universe revolves only around us. There is nothing in the second estate that challenges our self-centered and egotistical perceptions. Therefore, we don't recognize our self-value as being anything than what it is, the way it's always been, perfect. And having this perfect perception of ourselves, not only do we not appreciate who we have become, but we have no appreciation for anyone else, who are just as perfect in their self-centered and egotistical perceptions as we are. We realize that to test ourselves, or rather prove to ourselves that our self-worth and value is what we thought it was, we had to enter another state of existence where we could be challenged and tested. During mortality, our self-centered and egotistical perceptions of ourselves are challenged for the betterment and enjoyment of our eternal existence. This is where the third state of existence comes into play. This is when we need some further clarity about our second estate, the one we experienced before we became mortal, and how we experience our third estate as a newly created advanced human. Again, all experience occurs in our advanced and eternal brain. Through the stages of the advanced program of experience, for want of a better way to explain it, we are presently and are always living in our first estate. We experience our second estate in a body very similar to our true nature as an eternal human being. And within this realm, we are experiencing our third estate in the confines of the mind of the newly created person we became during the second estate. At least so it seems, and will always seem to us as we go through the experience of existence in the second and third estates. And the experience of our second estate, along with what we are experiencing in our third estate, occurs in the present, in the confines of our eternal mind. Mortality is experienced in the mind of a newly created advanced human. The experience is generated by the same program that is generating the experience in our true self's brain as an eternal human being. The energy allowed by the program regulates the level of energy, thus our physical and mental abilities differently in each estate. Of course, as we experience our third estate here upon this earth, there seems to be no other experience of reality than that which we have presently in our conscious mortal state. But what about our unconscious mortal state? Do we not dream? And in these dreams, do we not believe as we are dreaming that the experience is real? We do not recognize it as not being real until we wake up. But then we realize that the dream was not real, nor will it continue to be part of our human experience unless, of course, we dwell on the dreams and then change our reality to conform to them. A dream provides us with empirical evidence that it is possible to experience something in our brain that is not part of our current reality, but appears to be real. During the dream, we can feel emotion. We can feel pain, sorrow, fear, joy, elation, and all other kinds of things, emotional aspects, during a dream. Some of us can even fly, and some of us can stand underwater indefinitely and seemingly transcend the laws of nature in our dreams. But are our dreams real? If we could remember them precisely as they took place, we would have to concede that they seem to be real and that they provide an experience in which our physical brain reacts to an environment that existed solely in the confines of the dream itself. We have experiences in dreams with other humans. We have an experience with them, and the experience feels real. We interact with them, and they interact with us. The experiences feel real. But are they? If we ask anyone from our dream experience if they recall being a part of our dream exactly how we remember them to be, the answer will inevitably be no. The experience that we have in the first estate involve interactions with other humans who are equally endowed like our true self with the same potential and abilities. There are no limitations placed on any of the humans living in a perfect environment with a perfect human body. That includes the perfect human brain. There is no eternal human being who is more powerful than another. There is no inequality of any kind. Thus being the case, there is no need for a government or for the eternal human to subject itself to any other human. Because in this perfect state, a person will always act appropriately in order to perpetuate the perfect state. Thus, there is no free will, in essence. In other words, no one has to worry about not being as perfect as everyone else. We've always been this way, and no one has ever questioned how we became this way, because we didn't become this way. We've always been this way, eternal human beings. At last, I have to go off track here for a minute to help the world understand this point of an eternal human always being perfect and eternal. It'll help in our understanding of how things work. Let's take what science has hypothesized about existence and utilize its theories to help us understand this important real truth. Consider an element in its pure form that never changes and has been this way forever. Since science has speculated that everything started with a Big Bang, let's consider the elements that caused the Big Bang. We cannot use any of the elements that science currently designates as elements, because science maintains that all the known elements came into existence after the Big Bang. Science fails us because it cannot explain what caused the Big Bang and what elements were involved in the explosion. So let's invent an element that supposedly caused the Big Bang. Let's call this new element Elohimide. Nah, let's just call it eternal element A. Element A has always been and could never have been created because it existed before the Big Bang in its pure form. And if we suppose that element A was somehow created out of something else, we have to wonder what was the very first thing then that created the very first thing. There always had to be something, because if there were nothing, then there would continue to be nothing, which would end in nothing and produce nothing. But it's quite obvious to us that we are not nothing. And if there were a Big Bang that created our universe, then there's a possibility that there are other Big Bangs that have, are, and will be creating other universes. Boy, it's hard to use a fallacious theory to prove real truth, but I'll continue doing the best I can. So we have element A, and it has certain properties that do certain things. In our example, using scientific fantasy, element A creates Big Bangs, which then allows a possibility for life to happen somewhere down the road. Element A has always created Big Bangs, and it never changes what it is and what it does. Elements, however, are made of something. They are made, according to science, of atoms. So now we have the substance that is responsible for element A, which created the Big Bang, which created all things that we know, using the example that science provides us. Well, that's what you'd think, but then we have to consider that the atom is made up of something. Atoms, again, according to science, are made up of other particles called protons, neutrons, and electrons. However, we don't need to believe that an atom is made up of anything but itself, because science cannot see protons, neutrons, and electrons, but theorizes that these particles exist based on how the atom acts and reacts in certain environments. Okay, so now we conclude that the atom is an eternal thing that has always existed forever. Well, atoms form elements. Elements form molecules. Molecules form cells. Cells form skin, bone, and organs, which form a human being. If atoms have always existed and they naturally exist to form things, then why can't it be that they, in their perfect form, have always formed forever the perfect human being? That's exactly how eternal, perfect human beings exist. Because the atoms that make up the elements, that make up the molecules, that make up the cells, that make up the components of their human body, have always existed this way in their perfect form. If science, regardless of the corrupt nature of its belief system, can assume that atoms have always been, then why isn't it just as likely that the things that atoms do, they make things like human bodies, have always been done and will always be done the same forever, people without end? Science will attest to one thing, that given an unchangeable and perfect environment, an atom in its perfect form as a human being will not change, ever. The Human Reality book details many of the things about the second and third estates of experience that we go through as human beings. It does not mention anything about our first estate, but the things that are presented in the book are the real truth as they pertain to our experience in the second and third estates. But there is no joy or value in worrying about our first estate while we are going through our experiences here upon earth as mortals. Likewise, there's no joy or value in worrying about our second estate while we're going through the experience of our third. Incredibly, unhappiness and discontent will ensue in a person's life if one worries about the past or the future. We are here now in this experience. It is the only experience that really matters at this time. It is a wonderful experience. Yes, even the great misery and sorrow that we often go through. Knowing the real truth about it should enable us to realize the great importance of it to our overall experience as an eternal human being. If we then realize its great importance, then it becomes incumbent upon us to consider it as such and begin to live for the moment, for the present, and not feel guilty about the past or fearful of the future. Is it not guilt and fear that cause most of our emotional problems? We feel guilty about something we did in the past and fear what might happen to us in the future. The real truth presented in the marvelous working of wonder should help us understand that we will never change the past and we cannot change the future. It will be, what it's always been. A bunch of eternal, perfected human beings living in the present, although in different states of experience. We have a wonderful opportunity to take advantage of this third estate of our experience, as the person we are at this time, in this moment, which we will never be again. So why not make the best of it? Because in the end, in the real end, it's all good. Really good. And that, folks, is what it's all about.